Jujutsu Kaisen is a flawed masterpiece, or at least it's on the path of being one. It's been over 5 years since the release of JJK. The second season is finishing up as of writing this, and it's clear that the manga has maybe another year left or so. No doubt, the world is loving everything JJK, and so am I. Trust me, I'm not making this video out of hate for the series. In fact, it is the series I am enjoying the most right now. Every chapter, every episode, I'm eating it up on the edge of my seat. I haven't felt this way about any series in a good while, and I believe JJK deserves their props. However, I'm not the type of fan that believes that there aren't any issues with the series. I'll be one of the first people to tell every single problem about JoJo's and One Piece, but they'll never leave my top 10. They have flaws, yes, but flaws that I can look over, as the legacy of the series is still intact despite those shortcomings. And Jujutsu Kaisen, on the other hand, I'm not so sure. You see, as of recently, I've started to believe that JJK has a fundamental issue: the writing. To be more specific, I think there's a problem with the pacing and character writing. JJK has such a strong foundation to be great. A cool and aesthetically pleasing power system with unique applications, an interesting cast of characters, and amazing fights. But the way these characters get treated is sometimes just abysmal. Combined with the pacing, this leads to sections of the story just feeling outright questionable and impossible to look past. Let me explain. First, I have to give props to JJK for crafting some truly phenomenal characters that are favorites of mine. Recently, for example, Higuruma and Kashimo, but especially Higuruma. All it took was one chapter for me to be hooked on Higuruma and what he stood for, alongside the fact that he's the reason that we got one of my favorite Yuji scenes ever. This was great writing that you cannot find just anywhere. Unfortunately, what follows is the disaster of Kashimo. Now, I'm not here to just whine about how dirty Kashimo got done. You can just scroll on Twitter long enough and find that for yourself. But there is truth to the subject. When you get introduced to this interesting character who just tears Panda apart and demands to fight Sukuna, just like that, I'm hooked. This was especially enticing when Sukuna was still in Yuji's body and Yuji was going through a lot of self-loathing. So it built suspense and curiosity as to what will happen, and later on finding out that Angel wants to deal with Sukuna too just elevated the matter greatly. Then Sukuna swapped bodies with Megumi. Admittedly, this is a pretty great plot twist, as we've seen signs of Sukuna plotting on Megumi. Fortunately and unfortunately, now Yuji and everyone else can realistically fight Sukuna, I guess, though it relieved tension surrounding Yuji and his mental state, which I really liked. So I can look past that. After all I want to see is Kashimo fight Sukuna at the end of the day. And I'll admit, I was low-key more excited for Kashimo vs Sukuna than Gojo vs Sukuna. So I'm definitely to blame for a lot of the disappointment, but good God, I wasn't prepared for what was to come. With the reveal of Gojo vs Sukuna taking place before Kashimo could get a turn, it immediately threw up some red flags. Number one being, Gojo must lose. Now I'm fine with Gojo losing, even though he's one of my favorites. I'm not going to whine about his death too much either. In fact, I'm pretty indifferent about it. I just wish we got at least one panel before the scene of him in the afterlife. But back to what I was saying though, Gojo had to lose this fight, let's be real. And it wasn't just for Kashimo to complete his character arc. If Gojo won, the plot would be in shambles and tension wouldn't be too high. Thus, Gojo loses and we get to see Kashimo go all out. The issue is that this fight utterly sucks and gives Kashimo's character a terrible look. And before you start saying, oh, you shouldn't have gotten your expectations so high, I didn't have any in the first place, except wanting a good fight. What we saw was just a lackluster fight that didn't even show Kashimo as an underdog. It became clear to me then that Kashimo's purpose in the story was just to showcase Hikari and develop more of Sukuna's character, along with, some perspective on what it means to be the strongest. I don't think this is exactly an issue in itself, but when you build hype behind a character and their actions just for it to fall flat like this, it just feels disrespectful, but whatever. Unfortunately, this was not the first time it happened. It actually happened, 30 chapters ago with Yuki versus Kenjaku. Now in hindsight, this fight is truly amazing, and reading it weekly was a great experience, but the ending still leaves just a bit of a bad taste in my mouth. Yuki was such a good character, and this fight really elevated the fact, but having her lose in such a way felt out of the blue. Having Kenjaku use Kaori's technique like that when the audience has no prior knowledge of the technique in the first place, except for like, a few glimpses in his fight with Yuki. And it's just a shame because she was one of the few female characters who were really well written, and she has interesting ties to other characters. And now we'll never see those interactions. Scenes of her and Gojo, gone. More scenes of her and Yuji, gone. Any scene of her and Todo, completely destroyed. Speaking of Todo, another great character who's a fan favorite, absolutely shows out in Shibuya and then is never seen again. It's not like the other characters here where he died. He just lost an arm and his curse technique. And so what, he can't fight anymore? Does that mean we can't even see him have conversations with Yuji and the rest of the cast? I would really like to see him interact with Chozo, but I guess we'll never see that happen. By now, my point should start to make sense to you, and it all cultivates into one overarching problem. But before I reveal what that is, we must dive into the second and most heinous perpetrator, pacing and timing. I could tell right from the get-go watching season 1 that JJK had fast pacing. I thought it was a little weird initially when Megumi's sister was introduced, but I thought little of it. Some more signs started to show itself as the Mechamaru reveal happened seemingly out of nowhere, and it led directly to the Shibuya incident. This was something I could look past because all we missed out on was just, maybe some characterization of Mechamaru, his relationship with Miwa, and some more tension leading into the next arc, but hey, I could live without it, I guess. The story revolves around characters like Yuji and Gojo, so we could at least get time for interactions between them two and the other characters, right? Right? Well, kinda, but in this case, no. After Gojo was unsealed, seemingly early as well, you think we see his reaction to everything since Shibuya, and maybe some heartfelt conversations between him and Yuji, or at least have him mention the current status of his students, but instead all we got was a time skip and a wholesome moment. Like honestly, this is just bad writing. I don't think there's anyone out there that can convince me this was a good decision to make as an author. This is just outright awful and comes off as if Gege is trying to speedrun the ending. And now that Gojo is dead, the likelihood that we'll ever see or be told about what happened during the time skip is rather low, unless we get a random flashback to that time. But just like how we haven't gotten a Heian era flashback yet, my hope is starting to dwindle a little. But please, Gege, prove me wrong. Prove me wrong, please. Now that I covered the way that Gege treats the character and the pacing, I like to say that this all ties back into JJK having wasted potential. If Gege would just slow down and take more time to give moments that aren't fights time to shine, like when they were developing characters like Geto, I think the series would benefit strongly. And I get it, a lot of the character writing and things of that sort are very subtle, but some things are just plain missed opportunities, and these characters deserve justice, because they just die or get shelled before doing enough in my opinion. Characters should be like forces in the story. They act on their own and collide with others. They shouldn't just be means for the plot to work all the time. Well, the story isn't over yet, and I have hope that it will end in a nice way regardless of all the mess that's being created right now. At the end of the day, this is still one of my favorites, and I want it to stay that way. And it could always be worse. I could be a My Hero fan.